Lawyers of Reddit, what was the weirdest case you worked on? When I was a baby lawyer, one of our clients received a subpoena for business records from a proper plaintiff. PPP, a plaintiff who's representing himself or herself in litigation. The litigation was in connection with a business dispute that was headed toward mediation. We were involved because the PPP formerly worked for our clients and decided to leave and take some business with him. After he left, he got into a business dispute with one of the customers he took with him and decided to subpoena business records from his old employer, my client, to help with his case and countersuit. The PPP would send a demand letter a week and came to my office a few times to meet. He was pretty aggressive and threatening in all of our interactions, but most pro se or pro litigants are, so I wasn't overly concerned. Given that our interests were aligned, I worked closely with the attorney representing the customer who was directly involved in the litigation. He was an older, well-respected attorney in town. Fast forward a couple of months and I get a call from a friend at the older attorney's firm. And surprisingly, the PPP lost at the mediation on both his claims and the counterclaims made by the customer. Apparently, after the mediation was over, he went out to his car, grabbed a gun and shot both the older attorney and the CEO of the customer who was attending the mediation. He then went on the run from the police. I think the total amount at stake was around $20,000. Really senseless. As soon as I learned about the shooting, I alerted our building security to be on the lookout for the PPP. He was found the next morning with a self-inflicted gunshot in a parking lot. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the police department who said my address and the address of the CEO of my client was in the PPP's car. Not sure why I needed to know that information, but whatever. Shortly after that, I decided to switch to transactional work. I know what you mean, but I still prefer to imagine that a baby lawyer is a specialist in baby law. I'll give you two. One, older one that I've posted about before. Someone is fired from her job because of failure to comply with tasks and is denied unemployment. Our defense is that she was pregnant. My client told me some other crazy crap that was going on at the workplace. Discovery confirmed what my client told me, that her workplace was a front for a prepper compound and that they were demanding she do military style drills while pregnant. Unemployment still denied. Thanks, NC. 2 of my current caseload. I have a pending trial that includes allegation of an assault with a deadly weapon. The deadly weapon in question is a 20 inches box fan. Allegedly, the box fan was swung around via the electric cable like a flail before someone was struck in the head. My first reaction to was pretty simple. Where can I buy a box fan with a cable that strong? Not a lawyer, but work at a law firm. There's a case where a crazy lady's neighbor was allowed to have chickens in their yard. So she bought pigs, and the whole city stepped in and made her get rid of them. It was a suburban area. In retaliation, this lady buys 5,000 chickens from Tyson and unleashed them into her half-acre backyard. The chickens all die, obviously. She sued the trucking company that brought the chickens for defective chickens and negligent infliction of emotional distress because her daughter had to view the gore of 5,000 dead chickens in her backyard. She was pro se, of course. One time I defended an apartment complex who was sued by a blind tenant for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Plaintiff's gripe was she wanted a parking spot right in front of her door. Obviously, plaintiff was not capable of driving and didn't have a car. She wanted the parking spot in case friends came over. She didn't want them to have to walk as far to get to her apartment. The part that made it really weird was she already had an assigned parking spot like 3 feet away from the one she was demanding. She wanted the absolute closest parking spot to her door, or it was discrimination even though she didn't own and couldn't operate a car. She just couldn't see reason. I'll see myself out be going now. I had a case where the plaintiff told me he caught Adolf Hitler and that he won the Medal of Honor. His attorney missed court a lot, once because her pet duck had a nostril infection. The transaction was for approximately $6 million, and when I asked him whether he had applied for financial help, he stated that he'd asked an Irishman for a loan. He could not identify the specific Irishman. This case lasted in the nice Supreme Court from 1995 to 2015. I miss it. It was so much fun. This reads like the start of a Douglas Adams novel. A long time also I used to do some relationship property work. who gets what stuff after a couple splits up. In one case I represented the woman. Her ex-partner was self-represented, and he was totally crazy. He used to write long letters to my firm, addressed to the managing partner, who was a commercial lawyer, not a litigator, so he had nothing to do with the case. The letters always explained at some length that he was physically perfect, over 6 feet tall, and a genius WTH an IQ of 150, and that he would unleash the dogs of war and crush us all if we opposed him. Speaking of dogs, one of the main aspects of his case is that he said that after he and my client split up he bought a dog. Then the dog died in a car crash because he was so sad after the breakup that he crashed his car. So now my client owed him money for the 3 years worth of dog food he'd supposedly bought. Supposedly he used to ring me up and scream at me over the phone. He'd get naked and throw rocks at his neighbor's property. My client was terrified of him, and even I used to peer out of the elevator before leaving work at night in case he was waiting for me. The file was closed after he got drunk and choked to death on his own vomit at a party. I was going to say unexpected turn at the end, but it seems to fit so nicely with this guy. The day I learned that not everything on Jerry Springer is fake. I was a prosecutor for a couple of years. I was prosecuting a woman, stripper, who hit another woman, H, in the head with a meat cleaver, several times. The defendant worked as a stripper. She lived with a man who was a pimp. He looked like the stereotype you see in the movies. The woman that got hit with the meat cleaver was one of his prostitutes. The pimp was having relations with H and stripper at the same time, thus there was some bad blood. Well, they get invited to be on Jerry Springer and they all agree to go. Hug fight happens. We are talking multiple fights where clumps of hair are coming out. Stripper tells H, on the Jerry Springer show, that if H ever comes around the house again that stripper will kill H. Well, you guessed it. H comes by the house when they get back. Stripper hits H with a butcher's knife in the head several times. H lives. Stripper gets convicted of aggravated battery. Note, I did not do the charging in the office, so another attorney charged the defendant with aggravated battery rather than attempted murder. Court reporters are probably the calmest people you will meet in a courtroom. They rarely show emotions. The court reporter taking the plea was very attractive. During the entire pleas hearing, the pimp was staring at the court reporter the entire time. It was so bad, I was getting creeped out. The court reporter bolted from the courtroom the moment the hearing was over because she was completely grossed out by the dude after the attack. But before the plea hearing, they got invited back to appear on the Springer show. They went 2 more times. It was an absolute crap show, only appeared on the Too Hot for TV videos. Somewhere around here I have the old VHS copy of the 3 appearances. I want to see video of the hug fight. Sounds cute. Not a lawyer, but one of the car dealerships my dad worked for had a commercial in the 80s where they used a guy dressed up in a gorilla outfit, and the dealership had a whole jungle theme. In one of the commercials they said like, come down and get a new whatever car it was for 10,000 bananas. Some guy showed up with a truck full of 10,000 bananas the next week and wanted the car. It ended up in court and the banana guy won from it being deemed false advertisement. Not a lawyer, but I know a guy who was interning in a law firm, and he ended up getting sued by one of the top lawyers at the firm for damages over a lost case folder. The lawyer ended up having to drop the suit a few days later when he discovered that, in the process of moving into a new office, he had just left the missing folder in his old office. This was apparently also a rite of passage, and just about everybody who works at the firm had been sued by this lawyer at some point. I guess he hadn't been fired because they knew it would be a total nightmare. This was apparently also a rite of passage, and just about everybody who works at the firm had been sued by this lawyer at some point. This may actually be true, in that it was intentional. Basically get a feel for how the new guys react to getting personally sued for a frivolous lawsuit. Every lawyer worth his or her salt has a pro se plaintiff story. All of them are probably the lawyer's weirdest. Mine is no different. Pro se plaintiff sued an engineer who performed a home inspection following severe winds in Texas and wrote a report for the insurer that no wind damage occurred. She sued the engineer. Now, no lawyer would take the case because it was frivolous, and lawyers get sanctioned for filing frivolous lawsuits. So she filed it herself. In that petition, she outlined a ceiling fan coming loose and killing her cat, that she had a summer wardrobe that got soot on it from, I have no idea, the name of her dog. She also said that sometimes her dog would act up and she would roll up a newspaper and teach her dog a lesson. But rest assured, she loved her dog, that she was a good Christian woman and sang in her church. Her favorite color was pink, and 63 other pages of facts that, as you have guessed, have absolutely nothing to do with wind or engineering. Her case was dismissed because she did not attach an affidavit Texas requires when you sue an engineer. She did not let that go. Nope. She filed an appeal. She lost that appeal. She filed a petition to the Supreme Court, alleging that the Court of Appeals had no freaking idea what they were doing, that they were super corrupt and in league with the trial court judge to deprive her of her rights. The Supreme Court denied to get her review. She then filed about 6 more insane things with the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals before they threatened to hold her in contempt if she filed anything else of a frivolous nature. So some $50,000 in legal fees and a year of time later, there was a final end to it all. Legal fees would have only been $3,500 or so if we ended with the dismissal. This is why any lawyer worth his or her salt would much prefer to deal with another lawyer on the other side. The insane amount of unnecessary legal fees expended in dealing with pro se plaintiffs is egregious. Yes, they are easy cases to win, but they take a lot of effort that frankly, I'd rather spend on Reddit or something. Not a lawyer, but did paralegal work for about a year. There was a lady we represented who was flying down the highway, probably about 90 in a 55. Cop drives up behind her. Dash cam shows her swerving all over the place. He lights her up. She pulls over. He walks up and says, "Hello mom, how are you doing? Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" She is obviously clueless. He says, "Well, it looks like your tabs, registration sticker, are expired. Have you been drinking tonight?" Rest of the stop goes par for the course. This lady is about 5'1" and maybe 100 pounds when she's soaking wet with change in her pockets. She blows .29, almost 4 times the legal limit. Well, unfortunately, expired tabs was a secondary offense, meaning they can't pull you over just for that. They could give you a ticket for that after pulling you over for things like speeding, failure to maintain a lane, failure to signal, etc. We motion to have the case dismissed and it's thrown out. Had the cop said anything like "you were going pretty fast, you were swerving" anything, but because he stated the purpose as an illegal stop, the case was thrown out completely. The cop had one job here, one job. This middle-aged, alcoholized woman died in bed one day. Her husband had sort of given up on her, just letting her do her thing, sleep in and go to the store to buy a carton of white wine every day. She would then lay in bed and drink a gallon of wine every single day. He came home and found her unconscious on the bed. When she wouldn't wake up, he described her as cold and sorta stiff. He raised her to a sitting position and tried to give her some water, but it all spilled down her gown. He proceeded to call Fire's son, who came straight away. They didn't know what to do with her, so they carried her out, sat her in the car, taking care to fasten her seatbelt. They then drove to the ER and the husband went to the reception and said, "My wife sits in the car, dead." Cue personnel running on the double, hauling the long dead, wet wife from the car and trying to revive her. Case was about indecency with the corpse but was of course closed due to lack of mens rea. I've worked on many strange cases, but this one is kinda sticks out to me because it is both funny and sad, and because even if it would normally be a crime feeding a corpse and driving it around, it was done in confusion and out of love for this poor woman. I feel so guilty for getting a chuckle out of this one. Not a lawyer, but my uncle is. There was a house with 4 lesbians living in it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are couples. 1 and 3 start cheating on 2 and 4 together. So while 1 and 3 are in the bedroom together, 2 and 4 get in a car, I think it really was a Subaru, and drive it into the bedroom. No one was hurt. I think my uncle represented the homeowner's insurance company. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru. Craziest cases are those sovereign citizen people who refuse to acknowledge the authority of the trial court, or to create this word salad about the Constitution, maritime law, corporate entities, etc. Another time a woman wanted to charge her ex-boyfriend for stealing her cat. Her evidence: the cat was missing for 2 days. When she returned, she smelled like cigarette smoke. X is a smoker, ergo, he stole the cat. Lawyer in the hospitality industry. My firm had a case where plaintiffs sued our client because plaintiffs, claimed they brought their baby into our client's pool, another baby shat in the pool, and their baby got salmonella as a result. There was no evidence that the other baby even had salmonella. Their baby ended up being fine with no lasting health effects and we won on summary judgment. I was a prosecutor at the time. A parent found messages on their teen's phone indicating a boy had given another boy a BJ at a Boy Scout campout in exchange for a Fortnite game pack, a popular video game with kids. It gets worse. 2 other boys watched. Interviews were done. The boy that received had been bragging about it at school. After meeting with parents, none of them wanted us to prosecute. The kid that gave the BJ had parents with a business in the community. Not a case, but once my client asked me to put in her proceedings that once her ex-husband crap himself. So this could be read out in court. I'm not a lawyer, but my mom is and I worked for her for a summer digitizing her files. One case I read about sticks out in my mind. So my mom is primarily a divorce lawyer, but does handle some criminal cases. The case in question is a family law case. As part of the process to digitize her files, I need to read through them so I can title them properly and organize them adequately. So this case is about a lesbian couple, wife and wife, who are getting a divorce. They adopted 2 kids together. This in itself is not weird, but both the kids they adopted are special needs kids. I don't remember what exactly was wrong with them, but it's safe to say that they will likely never live entirely independently and would need to stay home or be in group homes. Maybe work an easy job like fast food or whatever. So this case was a custody case. But it wasn't that both moms wanted primary custody. It was that neither of the moms wanted primary custody. I didn't read the entirety of the file, but I think the resolution ended up being 50/50 split custody. So sad. Not a lawyer, but work for a law firm. We do a lot of divorces. We had some people spend a bunch of money on cat custody. Who will get the cat? We had another client that same week spend a lot of money on hat custody. Client had a really sweet hat, but his ex wanted it. We also had a stalker of a celebrity call in and try to get a case started for custody of the celeb's kid. Are you married? Spiritually married? Yes, but not legally married. Are you on the birth certificate number? Is it your kid? Not technically. Turns out the only time this person met the celebrity is going to their shows, trying to sneak backstage, and getting kicked out. Needless to say, we did not take the case, lol. Stalker stories like that legit terrify me. Sovereign citizens. Just nutty, and only a little scary. Crazy old ladies with nothing better to do than sue people. Just angry and mean. Pimps, drug dealers. Dangerous, but no more terrifying than a lame clown. Stalkers are terrifying. My mum is a lawyer and comes back with some pretty crazy stories, including but not limited to 1. The most recent one. Today, a client she's defending is getting charged for crapping and pee on a bus, then asking a 10-year-old girl if she wanted to have sex. 2. A man who went around multi-story parking garages throwing his own sperm on unsuspecting people. He literally had a van full of test tubes of his sperm. 3. An ex-military guy, around 20 or so, who went to an extremely posh private school and has very high-profile family, is being investigated for threatening to cut his friend's toes and fingers off with pliers, and actually waterboarding him over a 10-pound watch that his friend never actually took. Police found it between the couch cushions. I have a few more, but those are the ones that immediately come to mind. Hahaha. What the absolute frick? All of those? Any of them? What? I prosecuted a horse murder. The charges were for dogs let run at large causing damage. This guy's 2 pit bulls got out and attacked a neighbor's horse. They tore the poor thing's face to shreds. The horse belonged to a little boy who had saved up his allowance and raised and sold chickens to pay for part of the horse. The charges were misdemeanors and the law didn't require the owner to know the dogs were dangerous to hold him criminally liable. I had to write a brief on strict liability for misdemeanors and ended up winning. The next big battle was the restitution hearing, where we had to convince the judge of the value of the horse. Defendant was sentenced to 50 hours of community service at a horse rescue and had to pay $7,500 to the family for the value of the horse. Not a lawyer but work in public liability claims. A few years back a guy accidentally ran over a 3-year-old boy while driving into a fast food restaurant parking lot. It was suspected he was looking at his phone or otherwise distracted, but the police couldn't prove it, so he wasn't ultimately convicted of negligent driving. Once he was cleared, he tried to sue the restaurant for psychological damages on the basis of their parking lot being badly designed and providing insufficient visibility and speed management. Ultimately he lost. There was simply nothing wrong with the parking lot, so his claim didn't have any merits. But it pisses me off that he tried to get compensation for killing someone else's child. Not a lawyer but my uncle is. He had one case where a lady let her dogs loose in a Bed Bath & Beyond to attack a lady who was suing her. Then at the trial brought a giant stuffed dog with her for no reason. Giant stuffed dog with her for no reason. Psychological warfare. Clark to DUI trial where the accused presented the red-headed Irishman stereotype defense. Dude crashed his car wasted at like noon on a Sunday a mile from his house. Not guilty. He testified saying he went home after he hit a rock to look for his dog that had jumped out of the car. He was upset about the crash, so he had a shot and a beer before returning to the scene. He was found guilty of evading responsibility for hitting a mailbox and received a $150 fine. And yet it was successful. DUIs are hard to win for the state if there's even a plausible explanation. It's my opinion men on the jury have a there but for the grace of God sort of approach to them. Betting that wasn't the first time that guy had a DUI in his life. Barrister here. A mother of 3 came to my office, I think this was 3-4 years ago, to complain that other students at this particular school had made her son a bully. She wanted to sue the school for breach of duty of care because they didn't stop her son from becoming an butthole. If I'm honest, that kid was rude and generally an butthole, but so was the mother. Call it genetics. I never worked on this case, but it's most certainly the weirdest request of a civil action I have ever had in my career. I'm not a lawyer but was a legal assistant. This woman tried to sue her former employer. She was a live-in nanny as a tenant because she was terminated for being old. Turns out, she often disappeared for 2 weeks at a time, leaving the family without child care only to come back weeks later claim she was a tenant because she technically lived there for 3 months. The families didn't want to deal with the lawsuits, and other than the weird crap she was a damned good nanny, but after the second time she was often fired. She then wouldn't file an age discrimination lawsuit. She went on to do this to several families under different names. We looked her up via a friend the firm had on retainer who was also a PI. She was a textbook vexatious litigant and always appeared proper, then never appeared again after the first hearings, often an ex parte hearing. All of this is wild because filing a lawsuit where I am at the time was like $400. The prevailing question after our research on her was why these parents did not run background checks on people caring for their most precious babies. Maybe because she was an old grandma type, but I will never know. Phew, I heard a lot of crazy crap working in employment law. Anytime a pro se opposing party is involved with the posse comitatus in divorce court, determining custody and visitation with pets is always amusing and kind of sad. I'm not a lawyer but a legal assistant. I manage the office by myself sometimes when my boss is court hearings or something like that. One time I got a call from a lady and she told me that the German government, I live in Germany, tried to poison her by ordering a local radio station to spray poison at her front door. Also, she was convinced that the government was sending her subliminal messages through the newspaper. Then she started talking about chemtrails and HARP. She wanted us to submit her case to court by suing the Federal Republic of Germany. Had to inform her that we couldn't take her as a client. I actually feel pretty bad for her and I hope she gets the help she needs. I help victims of natural disasters access federal recovery grants to rebuild, repair, flood-proof their homes. There's a law that protects tenants who are displaced by their landlord's voluntary participation in a federal program. Essentially, the landlord is responsible for paying reasonable costs associated with moving as well as any amount they pay in rent above the cost of rent at the landlord's place. The program I work with the most told my client that they'd have to vacate their house for a few months so they could do the construction. Clients moved out as requested, but for whatever reason, the program didn't start construction for 5 months, so the house was just sitting vacant. During that 5 months, some squatters had moved in. They'd been there for the months when the program found them. So under our city's laws, they're tenants with all of the legal rights as if they had a lease, which made my client responsible for their moving costs and anything they paid in rent above the $0 mo the squatters were then paying. I got the city to cover most of the cost through a stupid loophole about housing unit density. I am working this case on appeal. So the father failed to give financial support to his children and estranged spouse. In the Philippines, it could be classified as economic abuse. We argued on appeal it isn't a form of violence against. So the wife and children the case. Father was convicted. You know what is funny? The wife and children signed a document withdrawing from the case after conviction. Like WTF. Why only now? You should know the consequences. You wasted time to testify and you retract? Not a lawyer, but I once read an application for a peace bond in which the applicant was complaining that his roommate, who has since moved out, had been breaking house rules. The applicant was requesting protection, no contact, etc., as she feared for her safety. Example of rules being broken. The roommate had cleaned the applicant's dishes without using the proper soap. The roommate cleaned the place without the applicant consent, etc. I was reading the justifications and thinking to myself I'd pay that person to be my roommate. A lady was a passenger in her friend's car, and they rear-ended someone. The lady sued her friend who was driving because when the impact happened, her seatbelt popped one of her implants. The thing was, the implants were almost 15 years old, and her other implant had already deflated a few years prior, so now they were even. It was my first case, a divorce case. The couple had a 15-year-old boy and to everyone's surprise none of the parties involved wanted to have the custody of the child. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.